Nancy Pearcey in her book, The Toxic War on Masculinity,
Mm.
asks the question, how did we as a culture come to a point of being able to say that masculinity is toxic?
Mm-hmm.
And she locates it all the way back in the Industrial Revolution. That before the Industrial Revolution, every household is its own kind of economy. So husband and wife, mom and dad, children, all labor towards a common goal, whatever the household is producing,
Mm-hmm.
and they do so, embracing their different responsibilities for that final product. Um, and when the Industrial Revolution happens, we take men out of the homes where, if he's a cobbler, he is a specialist in all dimensions of shoes,
Mm-hmm.
right? He can look at your foot and he can craft a shoe that will fit your foot. When you come to him with a shoe that needs a part replaced, the leather is worn through here. He can repair. He can fix. He can identify what's wrong with his product because he's made it. When you take him out of the home, then the factory no longer wants a generalist. They don't want a cobbler who knows all dimensions of the shoe. They only want a guy who can, pull the lever and stamp out the toe cap.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want the guy who does the toe cap to know anything about the lacing, because then he's going to leave his area. He's going to leave his domain, and be interested in how the lacing is done,
Mm-hmm.
or how the shoes are sewn together. But you don't want him to do that. He just pull the lever as efficiently as possible, stamp out as many toe caps. So
Which is detrimental to the spirit.
completely, and So it takes away some of his humanity, right? When God puts Adam in the garden, he puts him in the garden to work it and to keep it. He has responsibility for all creation. He's given dominion over all creation. But then if you just tell him, here's your row in the garden, just keep the weeds from growing here, it diminishes his call and his humanity. So that happens to man. And then also there's all the complications that come from the differences between working in the home and working in the factory, right? Like the home is never efficient.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, relationally dependent. And, dad teaching his kids how to do a task in the home is always slower, always
Mm-hmm.
takes more time, and there are more mistakes to fix in the end, than it is for dad to just do the same task over and over. It's far less efficient, relationally dependent, but it's not just what the household is making, right? So the household is its own little economy, but it's also its own little schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
It's its own little church, right? So it's its own little state in a sense. But when dad is gone during the day, children are learning apart from dad. They're being catechized apart from dad. They're being ruled apart from dad. And then dad comes home from the factory and he has to sort of reinsert himself into family life, which requires a complete shift in his way of thinking and seeing the world. And it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
So Pearcey says, men are tempted then, instead of coming straight home from the factory, they can go with their work buddies to the bar,
Mm-hmm.
or the tavern, or the brothel.
Because they're used to being away from home.
Right.
They're
right.
kind of,
It's just easier.
yeah.
So, or he comes home and, dinner is complicated. The kids have all of their needs. And it's just overwhelming. So it's easier for him then to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get you get political cartoons of the age that show like dad leaving the hearth again, having come home from the factory, and then he leaves, and you have, you know, mom pleading with him not to go back out to the tavern.
Mm.
And so this gives birth then to the temperance movement, and we're
Pause
painting
right.
with broad strokes.
Yeah, we can pause right there because that's. I think there's a lot there just to learn, even in the way we operate our own households.
Oh,
right?
sure.
So I mean, one thing you make me reflect on is I've learned just over the last couple years that my favorite day will be a day where, maybe I don't go into the office and maybe I've got yard work going on, right? So I'm at home, I'm doing yard work. Our young kids will come in and out. My son Lincoln will help for a little bit. Eileen will come, help do this thing, and then they go play.
Yeah.
So there's times where they're naturally learning from me. There's times where I'm present and, I'm pulled over to go engage in this thing. And then I'm back to working on the house. And then when I'm finished, I know I can see tangibly the works of my hands helping our home, right? Like maybe things are more organized or the yard's cleaned up or, whatever it is. And there's kind of peace in the household. And the evening seems to always go really well there.
Hmm.
So whereas when I'm pulled away from the household and I've been busy all day and I
Yeah.
come back, especially if it's kind of taxing type tasks,
Yeah.
it's not something where I'm able to kind of craft something, if I've maybe finished an article or something like that, then I can, okay, I've done this thing.
Right.
And that feels rewarding.
Right.
So your spirit's a little bit, enlightened there. But yeah, the taxing is certainly where I've drawn away. I've done something that feels mundane and I can't see the final
Mhm.
product. And then I go home and kids have not seen me, wife hasn't seen me. And like so I can see that play out in some days and I can see the healthy aspect play out in some days. But you're saying pre-industrial revolution, the cobbler or whatever, he's at home, he's working on this. His 5-year-old son can come in and he can help with a little bit and he can
Right.
show that. And the son respects the father. The father's making bonds with the son. He's able to go and, take a little hour break and, play with his daughters and his wife's there and they have lunch. So everything's oriented towards the home.
Right.
And that gives fulfillment. It gives relational strength. You can see how that's healthy. And I like how you're kind of saying it's its own little city,
Yeah.
right? That's,
Yeah.
yeah, you make me long for that. Yeah.
And I mean, part of our work as pastors, it's not going off to the factory, but you said it a second ago, so much of what we do is intangible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our kids can hear the sermon on Sunday morning that we've spent time during the week crafting, but there's nothing, there's no finished product when sins are forgiven, when we
Mhm.
absolve people. They're not done in a
Mhm.
sense. So that's, for us too. There's a need for man to have something that he can accomplish,
Mhm.
something where there's a finished product and he can say, this is complete. Now it's on to the next thing.
Mhm.
Now it's to the next task.